The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. We're happy to welcome you this morning to the first of a two-part series that is brought to you by the Texas Department of State Health Services and the Texas Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. My name is Anita Wheeler, and I'm the Department of State Health Services School Health Coordinator as well as the School Nurse Consultant. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Texas Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, and Dr. Diana Everett for collaborating with us on this webinar series. We're excited to bring this broadcast to you to help give you a better understanding of physical activity. But before we get started, let me do a little bit of housekeeping so you have an understanding of how the webinar will work. When you look at the settings up here, let me get a spotlight on it, you will see that there are two options. One is with microphone and speakers, and one is with telephone. We'd ask that you put the appropriate box, check the appropriate box. That way you'll have the best sound and you'll be able to hear the webinar series. Again, the settings are here. We have everyone muted right now so that we have the best quality and we don't hear anybody's typing their morning emails or any background noise. But when it comes time for the question and answer section, you will see right here in this box, that's where you will type in your questions, and we will be able to monitor those on our end here at the Department of State Health Services. We ask that you use the question box throughout the webinar. We're going to have a question and answer session towards the end in order to keep things flowing well. But make sure that you go ahead and put your questions in because we'll be monitoring those as we go along. If you have technical difficulties, here on the right-hand side, you'll notice a toll-free number as well as a long-distance number for you to call, and they can help you should you have any kind of problems with the webinar or with sound. I'd like to introduce Dr. Diana Everett. We're proud to be partnering with them as part of this two-part series. Diana is the Executive Director for the Texas Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. Prior to joining TAPERD in 1999, Dr. Everett was the Executive Director for the National Association for Girls and Women in Sports. She's a lifelong Texan, and she holds a doctorate in sports administration from Texas Women's University, a master's in physical education from Baylor University, and a bachelor's in physical education from the University of Texas at Arlington. Prior to moving into the association management position, she taught physical education, health, and biology. She has also coached for 11 years at various high schools in Texas. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Diana Everett.
Thanks, Anita. TAPERD is excited to be partnering with DSHS to present these webinars. Let me tell you a little bit about TAPERD. We are a nonprofit professional association of individuals in the allied fields of health, education, physical education, recreation, and dance. We are composed of over 3,500 members serving students from kindergarten through college. TAPERD was founded in 1923 with a mission of improving the quality of instruction and advocating for the disciplines of health, PE, recreation, and dance. TAPERD is the only association in Texas serving education in all 4 of these disciplines. I'd like to thank Debbie Ray. She is our 2015 president of TAPERD. She will present the webinar today, and we are extremely proud to have Dr. Ray's leadership and to have her represent our organization.
Thank you, Diana. I would like to introduce Dr. Debbie Ray. She is a full professor at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. She has taught physical education and coached in public schools for 12 years prior to earning her doctorate in pedagogy and sports exercise psychology. Since coming to TCU, she has served in various roles and has most recently become the Associate Dean of Health Sciences and Research in Harris College of Nursing and Health Sciences at TCU. She has published over 40 peer-reviewed articles and 14 books on physical activity, eating disorders, and adolescence. Her primary emphasis is on diversity, behavior change, and motivation. She has presented at over 250 local, regional, national, and international conferences. So we're really fortunate to have such a highly renowned speaker with us this morning. She's been an invited speaker on behavior change, motivation, and eating disorders, and she has developed and trained physical education teachers and in-service trainings on developmentally appropriate curriculum which spans across Texas, Iowa, and Missouri. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Debbie Ray.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being on this presentation today and your interest in what we have to tell you about physical education and recess and the link between that and classroom learning. I just want to start by saying that, in my 36 years of teaching and preparing teachers and being out in the schools with everything that I've done, it's been a real honor to be the president of TAPERD organization this year, and then to be able to join forces and collaborate with the Texas Department of State Health Services. I really appreciate being part of this, and I think, having the number of people we have on today shows the interest in what's going on in our schools, and that we really need something different to motivate us and move us in a way that will help our kids be productive citizens, not only now, but in the future. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I want to give just a couple of things. One is I went to Finland back in 2012 because of what I had heard about with their educational system and how well that they had performed through the years, going from an F to an A+ over about a 25 to 30-year time period. What I since learned is that much of what they have done over these past years was a product of learning from us back in the 60s and 70s. And then things kind of went wrong for us, and things went right for them. But in the meantime, things have gone right for other other countries as well. So I want to talk a little bit about that and what's happened in the U.S., what's happening in Texas, and then from there take us to a place where we can see what other countries are doing and how it's different from us. And then a research project that I'm doing here in Texas that is showing some very, very promising results. And then to, last but not least, suggest some things that we can do now to help us move in a very positive direction to change the platform for our learning environment for our children. So let me start with this, what might be considered a comic picture, but in reality it's a very serious picture, and that is, and we all know it, is that we want kids to enjoy learning. We want them to be part of a very productive environment. But what's happened is we've had the state bring down situations for us that we have no control over, that we're supposed to work to a test, and then we bring that down to the administrators, and the administrators down to the teacher. And you know all the debates that have gone on. Do we have good teachers out there? Do we not? Do we have good administrators out there? Do we need to switch? And then it comes down to the child. And I think the saddest part about this whole thing is you heard in my introduction that I used to be in high schools. I then went to the university setting. I'm an associate dean now at TCU, and I work with students on a regular basis who are succeeding and who are failing. And what I can tell you is that student sitting in that desk in front of you right there, who everybody says to relax, relax, just answer the question, and taking that test to its ultimate, we have to know an answer to a question, not the joy of learning of how do we get to answers, but you need this answer. That now has come into the university arena. And I just want to explain for just a second what that really means. You may think, well, you know, once they get there, they've passed their exams, they've gotten to that level, they're smart, they know what they're doing, they're ready to engage in learning. No, they're not. They're stressed out, they're anxious, they quit school, they can't take tests anymore. They feel like that everything is coming down around them. And then you take them a step further and they go out into the public arena where they have to take jobs on, and they can't take the pressures of the job. They feel like they're going to fail. We're creating an environment that is a fear of failure environment. And it's starting at our kindergarten, our pre-K levels, with the competition that we have, the lack of trust that we have, the lack of understanding of what we need for our teachers, our administrators, our superintendents, and all in all for our kids, the health of our kids. So I want to start by showing you a couple of pictures. The one on the left is the one we're very familiar with, the student that's in the classroom pretty much dazed by the middle of the day, wants to probably move a lot more than they're getting to move. We've actually created environments out there now in many, many school districts where we try to do movement in the classroom and, you know, at least give them something to do and then sit back down and do their work again. And then on the right-hand side, you see a very different mindset where the individual is, or individuals are playing on a tree. And to you and me, it looks like a tree with different branches coming off of it, you know, more forest-like. But to the child, it's actually an environment that is very, very conducive to innovation, problem-solving, and critical thinking skills, one of which we are losing in the classroom. We're teaching to a test. We're trying to find answers to a test. But in reality, we're losing the essence of what creates in a child the ability to do things on their own, create, problem solve, and critically think in an environment that we have to be constantly moving in as we move into adulthood. So if you take that a step further, I'm not saying that we always think inside the box if we're raised in a classroom as the left picture shows. But for the most part, I'm saying that the students that I'm seeing at the university level, people that we're seeing, the young people we're seeing out in the workforce today, are a product of teaching to a test. On the right-hand side, you see a product of more play and innovation and creating that I don't know if you recognize the lower right-hand picture, but this is a snapshot of the Philae rover, which landed on a comet over 300 million miles away from Earth. Now, I'm not saying that every child who plays out on a tree is going to be able to land a rover on a comet. But what I am saying is that as a result of being able to see the problem solving and creativity and innovation that we should be able to allow our kids to do when they're young and be able to continue to create as they get older, that's missing. And as a result, we're not going to be the innovative country one day that other countries have wanted to come in to see from us here. We also are not going to be able to be the math and science wizards if we continue to put ourselves in this box where we're not allowing children to explore and make something out of whatever they want it to be when they're young. So with that, I want to ask you, what does it take to create an opportunity where all children can have that equal position to be able to learn and do it well, but at the same time have the rigor that it takes to move us forward? And I would say to you that it's not in sitting in a desk for 7 hours a day, which our country does. So in this segment that I'm going to go into now, I'm going to talk about what's going on in our country and what's going on in other countries. and be able to just give you a glimpse into some things that I think, as we go through these slides, what we might need to do a little differently. So we have global tensions that are out there, and some countries are doing one type of tension or one type of responsibility, and then there are other countries that are doing another. So what you'll see on here is we have excellence on the left, academics on the left, and I on the left. And on the right, we have equity, play, and we. And so what we're finding is that in other countries, they tend to be more of the right side, which is equity, play, and we. And U.S. is more on the left side, excellence, academics, and I. The problem with this particular picture, if you talk to other countries, is that to receive excellence, we don't necessarily have the equity. We actually have to compromise the equity to achieve excellence. And I know that may seem hard to believe at this point, that if we're achieving excellence, we're trying that for everyone. But in reality, only some go to the excellence stage, and the rest stay below that, where they're not getting the amount of responsibility that they need in order to learn at the highest levels. On the other hand, academics and play, you may say, well, we're not in there to play all day, every day. You're right, we're not. But play should be the essence of a child's whole motivation when they're young. And what we're seeing in our country today is that we're starting children earlier and earlier in their careers. And I say career because we are starting education sometimes at 3 and 4 years of age in order to get them out of the home life and into a school setting where we think that that's a safer and better learning environment for these children. But in reality, instead of creating that position where children have the ability to learn in their environment where they do best, which is what the young children should be able to do, we're already teaching them high academics when they're young on reading, writing, and math, when in fact they just aren't ready for that yet. And then the I versus the we is that at early ages we emphasize competition. And we do this in very subtle ways. We do things like, you know, is this school better than this school? Well, where should I send my child to school? Should I send them to this district or this district? It's all about I. In other countries, it's all about we. We want our school district to be as good as another school district. We want school districts in general to thrive. We don't want one school district to be better than another. And in that, you see all kids very equally being educated across the way. Here, there are some results for excellence based on the PISA results. And the PISA results are performance standards at the global assessment perspective that come out every 2 years. And what you'll see here is that, if I can point, this is the average of where things are. And then as you see the flags come up, you'll see where everybody resides. So you'll see the U.S. is just a little below average. And then you'll see all the other countries come up and where they are on the PISA results as a result of the 2012 results. What you see is that the U.S. is in the middle, and you say, well, you know, why is that happening? Well, it's the testing, pretty much, predominantly, but it's also sitting in the desks. It's not getting out and moving like we should. And so as we think about, as I move through this presentation, as we think about what's going on, I just want to give you a glimpse at what we see if I were to compare Finland and the U.S. And what you see is that the U.S. ranks 21, 24, and 31 in reading, science, and math. We have standardized tests that we do just about every year, starting 3rd grade. We don't have a very high graduation rate. You could argue that our graduation rate is actually higher than this. We've had estimates as high as 86%. The 75.5% is when we actually track the individuals who have left school districts and not come back. So dropouts versus the 86% is we can do the 86% as a result of not looking at the dropout rates, because we say, well, they've moved. Well, they really didn't move. They dropped out. So when we look at that, that's what brings the graduation rate down. We can also see that our dollars per student at the secondary level is much higher than in Finland, where it's $7,829 per student. They're ranked in the higher area of country rankings. They have no standardized tests, and they have a very high graduation rate. That in itself is not as important to me as how we teach. And this next slide, I'm not wanting you to, just get into every hour and every piece and what does this mean. But what I want you to see is in countries like Finland, they actually base things on how many hours we teach per week instead of how many classes we teach per day. And this kind of reminds me, I'm going to give you just a brief look into the way I train if you were to train in a marathon. If I were to train for a marathon, I would run minutes per day in order to achieve a 4-hour destination outcome when it came time for the marathon. In that context, what it means is that I'm running so many minutes a day that is equating to somewhere around so many minutes of that mileage, whatever that may be. But I don't think in miles, I think in minutes. That's how we're doing here, is instead of saying, well, I've got to run 4 miles a day, I just want to make sure I'm touching on math 3 hours a week, or I'm touching on language arts or Finnish 7 hours a week, or I'm touching on whatever it is this many hours a week. And this is what the country of Finland does, is that they touch on so many hours a week. But what I want you to also see is that they set up their schools very different than we do. Now, I'm not saying that we have to go in and set up a 4.5-hour day for our first graders yet. The reason I say yet is because I really do feel that we've gone way overboard with how much we teach our young children. You and I can't even sit for 7 hours a day. How do we expect children to sit for 7 hours a day? And so when we look at the Finnish system and what a school day looks like, you can see that it's not about what the content is in those boxes. It's that they only do 4 contents a day with 15 minutes each hour of recess. And it's required at the country level for them to have an hour designated as a content, but 15 minutes of that has to be recess. And that recess has to be outdoors and unstructured. Then they have after-school programs that go from there. And you can see that they don't have grades below the grade of 5th grade. They don't do standardized assessments, and they have no external standards. They're all locally controlled. This would be a comparison if you were to say what we do in a day, 7 hours a day, to a Finnish model, which is 4.5 hours a day. And you can see that even with our 6 hours of content per day to their 3 hours of content per day, and even if you added some recess and character development and physical education daily into the schedule, we would still have 2 more hours per day than they do right now with the rankings that we have. Now, Finland would tell you they don't care what the rankings are because they care more about the health and well-being of their children than they do about the score. Whereas in U.S., we care about the score. We care about where we are, why we're there, and obviously we need more time in our seats in order to learn to the extent that we need to. So what I want to go into here is why do we think physical education and recess can actually be the platforms for rigor and learning in the classroom? Well, if we look at the benefits of physical education, we know that when kids are young, they need to move. They're wired to move. They need to do this throughout the day. We've seen study after study that has shown that children need to move. But earlier and earlier ages, we're sitting them in the desk for long periods of time with no movement. With PE, this is a structured learning environment. The children need this to learn gross motor skills, fine motor skills, social-emotional development, cognitive development. And on top of that, it actually helps with refining the brain framework. And when I talk about this, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on brains. But what I am going to tell you is this. Every time we go out and move, you and me included, we are firing off the synapses of the brain in order to create highways, essential highways, that help us be able to maneuver lots of different things that we do in our lives. If we sit kids in the seats for as long as we do, and the brains go dead on them, there is no firing of synapses. There are no highways being built. And if we're losing those highways being built when they're young, think of what happens as they get older. And what we're finding with research now is that as they get older, we're creating Alzheimer's earlier in adult lives. We're starting to see it in people as at the ages of 45 to 55 years of age. And we're starting to think that it's because of the lack of synapses of the brain cells when children are young all the way through their high school experiences. So benefits of recess, you see that the left side doesn't change at all, but as a result of recess, we should have unstructured outdoor play time. That's very, very important. And when I say unstructured, I truly mean that. We've taken so much responsibility away from children. We've taken so much interaction away from children because every time something goes wrong, we're afraid of a lawsuit. We're afraid that parents are going to be upset, and so we take it away instead of allowing children to work through whatever it is they need to. We know in research that bullying is a big deal at recesses, and so many superintendents and administrators have said, I don't want to hassle with this, so I'm taking it out of the school so I don't have to worry about it. I'm here to tell you that we can bring it back, and we can bring it back in a big way. We also see that we improve creativity, problem-solving skills, innovation, giving the body of the children an optimal functioning perspective. They're able to move in ways that you and I would have never dreamed to teach them, just given the opportunity. So what is it about this play, unstructured outside environment that's so important? Well, what we see, and these pictures have been around for a while now, but what we know about them is that it's very obvious. If we're moving over a 9-month period, you can see right here that this is a child, 2 different children, one who is doing an intervention of movement, and this is one that's doing no intervention. But in the summer, let's just say it started in the summer, this is where they both are. Then we go through 9 months of school, and this is the one that's been moving. Look at the brain activity here, how much more vibrant it is, and then look at your waitlisted, the one that's not getting movement, and how dead that brain is. That's what we're talking about that we need to see changing. We want to see the upper picture, not the lower picture as we move through. Another thing that's out there, and I don't know how many of you know about this, but there's a website called Utilifit, and I just learned about it not too long ago, but it is actually comparing us with the lack of movement, the sedentary behavior, to smoking. And we've had lots of stuff on having to quit smoking, but we haven't had a lot on actually tying the connection between chronic diseases and sedentary behavior as much as we are now. And so what you see is if you look at what the data is showing, just 1 hour sitting is as unhealthy as smoking 2 cigarettes. That's giving us a hint, especially as our kids are trying to go through school, that we're already conditioning them to a smoking environment without smoking by sitting them in a seat all day long. And so the newest motto for them, or the marketing piece that's going out, is sitting is the new smoking. So I just wanted to show you what they're showing with, if you just get a minute or 2 of activity each hour, what it will do. It can reduce certain chronic diseases or the threat of those by 21% in breast cancer, 25% in colon cancer, 27% strokes, 30% type 2 diabetes, and 50% in hypertension. We have in this country more anxiety than we've ever had. If you looked at prescription drugs and trying to understand stress and anxiety in people, this is where a lot of it's going, followed by cancer and heart issues. All, they say now about 97% of all disease has been sedentary behavior, lifestyle kinds of things. The other piece that I just want to throw in, I know this isn't part of the title, but I feel it's very important if we're going to start bringing in more activity into the schools, is that I learned when I was in Finland that it's very important to have stability with character development. And I know in many, many schools that we're using a philosophy around character development, but we're not actually teaching a curriculum around character development. We're teaching, and especially from a counselor perspective, we're teaching bullying curriculum. And I wanted to address this for a second because the bullying curriculum actually is a mindset that in the brain of a child is emphasizing bullying instead of removing bullying from their vocabulary. So what I mean by that is our brains are positive thinkers, believe it or not. And so when you say, don't do that, they hear, do that. If you say, don't run through the hall, they run through the hall. If you say, don't talk, they talk. Everything that you say, take the negative off of it, and that's what they do. So we have to start learning to say things in a more positive direction on what they should do instead of what they shouldn't do. In the character development piece, that's exactly what I'm saying here, is that we need to teach to the total child. We need to make sure that children are understanding of empathy, honesty, respect, truth, good and bad, whatever that may be. Empathy being the biggest source of, what I do to you really influences, hurts you in a very big way. That could also happen to me. For them to understand this at very early ages is very important. So I'll bring this back up at a little bit different time. At this time, I want to talk about how we can be successful. Have launched for the past 3 years something called the LINK Project, which is happening in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but could happen across the state of Texas if we wanted to. It is a research project. It is one that I get lots of questions every year when I talk about all of this related to, well, how do we know that this would work? How do we know that this is what we need? How do we know that, we don't need to just have more tests, that we don't need to sit in the desk longer, that we don't need to really bring in more content? And so I'm going to show you today through some research that we've already been doing what's happening with that, and then I'm going to show you or talk to you about some things that are happening right now that are very positive, I think, for the state of Texas and for whoever's on the phone call today, what all you might be able to take back with you to your respective districts and start making some changes as we evolve through this thinking process of what we want to do with our children. So the LINK Project, our mission is to bridge the gap between academics and social, emotional, and healthy well-being. We're aiming to develop that whole child through increased recess and character development. And let me just say, that's an assumption that physical education is still a daily part of what we do. And I do know in many, many districts across the way, the requirement at the state level is that we have 135 minutes a week or 30 minutes a day. And what I'm saying is that we really need that physical education piece daily, structured and unstructured daily. And I know that's hard for us to think about because we still think we need this content every day. But as you think through some of the things that you're going to see here, and you reflect back on what I showed you with 4.5-hour days for a country like Finland and 7 hours a day for us, there are ways that we can let go of some of the content that we're doing with these kids and allow them the responsibility of being able to be innovative and creative and be able to learn some of these things on their own without us force-feeding them every day, every step of the way. And just keep in mind that the character development piece will actually help us be able to achieve this. So 4 15-minute recesses daily, maintain the physical education. This might be what it would look like, where you might have the 2 recesses in the morning and 2 recesses in the afternoon. You'd have the lunch in there, you'd have your physical education, you'd have your content. You still have a 7-hour day, but this is kind of how it might look in each of your areas. The positive action curriculum is the one that we're using for the LINK Project with the research that we're doing in the schools that we're in. And this is being done 3 15-minute lessons weekly. I will tell you that the LINK Project as a whole is just embraced 100% by parents, administrators, teachers, and children. I can't speak enough to how much they're loving the recesses and loving the positive action. So let me just show you a few results that go into this. If you look at this chart here, you can see that in the first year that we were out there, we were only in 2 schools because, and let me just give you a little history, we were in 2 private schools. One was a learning disability school, and one was a very high-achieving private school in Fort Worth. And in these 2 schools, we were measuring behaviors. We do this with different types of observations. We do a classroom observation behavior task sheet, and then we do a recess monitoring. In the classroom one, we are monitoring what you see here: off-task moving, off-task stationary, off-task vocal, and off-task low tone. What does that mean? Well, off-task moving is how many times do children get out of their seats and move around the room voluntarily without the requirement of the teacher. Off-task stationary is how much of the time are they sitting in their seat fidgeting. They're moving around, spinning in their seat, tapping on their desk, patting their feet, rocking back and forth. But they're stationary in doing this. Off-task vocal is they're talking to only one other person, or in many cases, they're talking to themselves. And I probably would hear laughter right now if I could hear you, but this is true. The kids love to talk to themselves, especially when they're young. These were kindergartners and first graders. I'm not doing this LINC project in older kids. I'm starting it in young kids because we know that if data doesn't show the results that it needs to show, that within 3 years a program will be done and we're going on to something else. And so when you see these things, I want to make sure that where we're giving the best possible chance for things to happen and for change to take place for the good is by getting the kids who have not had a lot of baggage yet. And when I say baggage, I mean they haven't been sitting in a desk for 7 hours. They haven't been doing a lot of the day in and day out stuff that our kindergartners and first graders are not going to have the access to. So we want to make sure that we have the success based on a clean slate and not a reflection of kids who have had trouble all the way through, and now they've got a lot of baggage with them, and it's not going to show the results because they don't know how to do recess, or they don't know how to be involved in good and bad forms of play, and how to work with people in and out of a recess situation. The off-task low tone is where they stare into space, and they pretty much are just daydreaming. They may have their head on their desk or whatever. What you can see from just the two groups that we did back last year is that they were significantly different from the fall, where we did training of the teachers and pretty much the baseline observations, to the spring, where they actually did the intervention. We launched it in January of last year, and all the teachers in the kindergarten and first grade classes taught the character development 3 days a week and did 4 recesses, actually 3 recesses last year because we only had the semester. So they did 3 recesses, 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, with the kids January to May. And so we collected this data at the end of April and the first part of May. So you can see that the biggest significance was in this area, where you can see the 25% down to the 8%. And the other biggest area was here with the off-task from 11 to 6. We did have some great significance with 9 to 3% too. Everything was significant, but the point is that in just 4 months' time, we saw results that we did not think we would see in this short a period. If you look at it by grade, just with 2 schools at this point, what you see is that all grade levels were also significant, except for right here with off-task vocal and with off-task low tone with the kindergartners. That was not significantly different, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't change. It just didn't show significance from the fall to the spring on the vocal and the low tone. Where you see the most significance is in the stationary position. You see when they started to move more, their fidgetiness came down. It was not a result of, like some schools are doing now, they're purchasing those movement seats where they can sit and move. It was not a result of that. They were actually sitting in their desk, very, very still, focused on their work. You might also ask, well, you have them come in. These are private schools. They're probably just better kids. No, they're not. They not only are not better kids, that, we need to think of it this way. Kids are kids are kids. What changes is the expectations and the environment. But in this case, children in a school setting who sit all day long, we see the same things in children in these private schools as we see in public schools. So I don't want you to get your heads around, well, it's just different there. We also did a listening assessment. And the listening assessment was to examine if they could sit for a 2 to 3 minute period and have a story read to them that was only 2 or 3 sentences long, and be able to answer 3 questions related to that story that were very developmentally appropriately set up, how would they do? And what we found is that, and we had a diagnostician come in to do this piece because we ourselves, we didn't want bias with us already knowing the students from observations. So what we did is we had a diagnostician come in and do this. And you can see in the fall of 13, where they were not doing the intervention, to the spring in 14, they went from a 70% ability to listen to 93% in the spring. Now, you might also say, well, they're just more mature. They're developmentally better at doing what they do. Now, I would disagree with that, but again, you know, unless you have a control school, we would not be able to disagree completely at this point. So then we look at kindergarten and first grade right down here, and you see that there was a significant change in kindergarten kids, and there was a significant change in first graders. One of the statements, we're out training in schools right now to start public schools in the fall, and one of the statements that was made by one of the teachers out there who teaches kindergartners and first graders said to me at one of these trainings, you know, for people to say, well, this could be developmentally what happened, she said, you did this in April, end of April, first part of May. She said, by then, our children are not listening like they should. They're not doing what they should. In fact, discipline issues get worse. Things get worse as the year goes on. And she said, this is incredible to see this kind of result change on kindergartners and first graders based on moving more. And they were doing physical education daily, and they were doing the 3 recesses, and then they were also doing the character development piece. And then here with the gender, you can see that gender-wise, they both increased significantly. But I want you to notice, we know in the literature that boys have a harder time sitting still than girls, and for them to have this kind of change is huge. And parents have been telling us over and over and over again, I can't tell you how much we appreciate that you're out here in the schools putting this project in motion. Our kids are coming home so much happier and healthier and full of life and wanting to learn. And being part of that engaging process again is just amazing. We're also it's becoming a recruitment tool where parents are learning about this and saying, oh my gosh, I want to send my kids to those schools. So just keep this in mind that as you move forward, these are things you probably want to think about, and we can help you if you decide that you want to implement something like this. I also wanted to show you, you might say, well, my teachers won't go outside. Well, I just wanted you to know that when we train the teachers, you know, you may say, well, what are the trainings like? I'm not going to go into all of it right now. If you want to know more before I get off, you can ask that question. But if you think, well, teachers aren't going to go out there because they don't want to be out in the cold and the hot, shouldn't we hire somebody to go out to do recess? No. Teachers need breaks too. Everybody needs to be in that situation. And what we found is that the teachers adhered very, very well to the program of taking these kids outside for recess, unstructured and outdoor. Yes, we had to do indoor sometimes with weather, but overall we have tried to stretch the temperatures back to the low 30s for taking them outside in the cold and up around the 100, 101 in the heat factor. Just put hats on them, put sunscreen on them, let them go out and play. They need this time to be out there. But you can see the teachers adhere very well to that. I wanted to show you real quick, if I can, a video. And what we've learned about recess is that kids like 2 things a lot. They love being able to play on hills, and they love being able to play in a very unstructured environment around just things out there to play with. So I wanted to show you this piece very quickly. You can see what kinds of kids are doing what out there and how they're able to play and move. Now, there are about 120 kids. I'm just taking a snapshot of one particular area where you can see what they do. It's just amazing how, you know, they play together, they work together, and they've done this through the character development and being able to go out multiple times in recess. I also want you to understand that with the recess piece, what we've learned is that every recess gives them the ability to play differently and to go to different areas for the resources of play. And so they may play with certain people on certain times, and then they may move somewhere else and do something completely different with other people the next time. So what have we learned so far anecdotally about these kids and what's going on with play and physical education, the character development, all being brought together, is that our kids are being better decision makers. And we've got story after story anecdotally, but one is a couple of girls came in and said, I need to go to the nurse. And the teacher said, now, you know, we're going to recess in about 5 minutes. And the girls looked at each other and said, oh, okay, maybe I don't need to go to the nurse. And so then she said, now just remember, when you come back from recess, you're not going to be able to go to the nurse either. If you're sick, you need to go now. And if you're not, then go to recess, you'll come back, and you'll get engaged again. And they looked at each other and said, no, we're fine. We'll go to recess when we have recess. The message there is that they know they need to move. They know they need to do things. And so they're doing the nurse activity or getting in trouble, whatever they can, in order to get themselves to a place of moving. We also know that they will explore and change their ability levels as they go. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story on this, but we have some hills at one of the schools that we're working at, as you saw earlier. And I watched some kids try to climb a wall that was part of the external structure of the school building. And we've taught the teachers that to allow them to do it, unless it's just an unsafe environment, allow them to explore. And so what we found is that there were these kids that would go over there every day and multiple times a day with the recess. And what we found is that every time they would get up to do the wall, some of them would get up just bam, right up to the top of the wall, look down and say, come on, you can do this too. And then here comes another one, and they'd go, oh, I don't know. And they'd get 1 foot up, and then they'd get back down, and they wouldn't go anywhere. Over time, what you find is that kids, through the exploration, in their own ability, time, span, would climb the wall, get up there, and start feeling proud of themselves. That's the confidence that we want in kids. That's what we want to see them do on their own without the help of you and me or anybody else trying to tell them what to do, that they can learn that through exploration. And so we're learning this anecdotally as well through the recess observations that we're doing out in schools. So what are our next steps? Well, this is an important phase because I think it's something that is, as school personnel, everybody on here, you're interested in knowing how should we as school districts move forward? We've got all these people, down our necks, screaming at us that we've got to have better scores. We've got to be able to show that our school district is an exemplary school. We've got to be able to show that we're doing the content. What if these kids can't read? What if these kids can't do their math or their science when they're 3rd and 4th grade? What I would say to you is, can they now? I mean, that's the question I'm asking. Is we're not successful with the way it's going. And what we're finding is as we start creating this movement of away from sedentary and towards brain activity again, allowing them that 15 minutes after the content to get that brain adjusted, clear it of what maybe troublesome stuff they had to work through, things that might be really frustrating to them, be able to get outside and put that in perspective and then come back in and go again. We're finding it's only taking transition-wise, going in this new direction, 50 seconds each way, out and in. And I know, I can hear you saying it now, oh, but not my kids. No. They're so bad that if we take them out, it's taking 4 to 5 minutes to go out and 4 to 5 minutes to come in. That gives us only 5 minutes of activity time. No, that's what we saw at these other schools too. What we're seeing now is that it only takes 50 seconds. Why? Because they know they've got another time to go out. Now, I also want to bring up, I told you that we had 3 recesses, not 4. The program, the research that we're doing is 4 recesses a day, and we are launching that in the public schools in the fall. Why 4? Because if you only do 1 in the afternoon after lunch, they're not getting enough time with that hourly break time of being able to move from one thing to the next and get that outdoor unstructured time to just reprogram and get ready. The other thing is why we did 3 last year is because they only had 4 months to try this. And so it was middle of the year. It's very hard to change a schedule in the middle of the year. So we stayed with the way it was and just plugged in the recesses where they naturally fit. This year, in those schools and in the new schools coming forward with training, we are doing the 4 recesses. We're in 2 school districts right now doing training. 4 intervention schools total, 3 in one school district, 1 in the other. And then we're also doing control schools in each of those, and we have control schools for each of our private schools. We're doing positive action in all of the schools, and it doesn't matter if another school is doing a different curriculum, that's fine. It's just that we don't want control schools doing positive action. They need to be doing either something different or the philosophy type of character development instead of a curriculum. And then we're going to launch in K-1 in the fall, and we're going to be doing the 4 recesses in positive action and the physical education. And we'll continue that intervention through the spring. I'll be doing a grant to get more funding. But at this point, I also want you to know that the funding that we're getting up to this point has been through foundations and stuff. So you might ask, well, what are we doing now that we have control schools? Do we have any data? Well, yes, we do. And this is the fall data, so this means that the 2 private schools that last year were the main focus of just going through the process, getting the trainings, all that kind of stuff, they are still the ones that we're measuring now. So setting A was the private school who has exemplary status that is moving on into big dreams for the kids. And then setting B will be the private school that has some learning disability settings. Still exemplary school, but moving in a direction of helping them with a lot of learning disabilities that may be taking place with the children. So when you look at this slide, this is from this fall, early on. We did this in late September, early part of October. So the students in both schools, the control school that matched this setting A private school, the control school had not had anything other than knowing we're going to come out to observe, and the private school that had the intervention had it for the 4 months last spring, and then had started it right out of the gate with 4 recesses this fall, physical education, and the character development again. So the kids this year were K through 2 in the private schools, because we're adding a year each year until we get through grade 8 to see what's going on. We are doing we're doing yearly synopsis of this, but 3-year patterns, because that would be when the first STAR testing came into play to see how they're doing academically with reading, math, and science. But what you see here is that their appropriate behaviors. This is our intervention, the recess group, character development group, and this is our control group. They are very, very equal in all aspects of the schools. And we're getting a 70% appropriate behavior rating versus the 51% for appropriate of the control school. And if you look over here, inappropriate is mirrored. And, being able to see this kind of issue and seeing that the intervention school is doing so much better against a control school speaks to what this kind of intervention can do. And then you see where the most areas are that are being utilized, and it's the stationary, the off-task stationary that's creating sitting in their seats, but they can't sit still. And then this is our learning disability environment. We have a control environment just like this school in a control school, and you can see even better results, 80% to 57%, I think it is, and vice versa. And so what you're seeing here is that with learning disability kids, with kids that have a hard time with ADHD, have a hard time with very slight autism, this is working for them hugely in being able to move and get out there and do what they need to do. So what can you do? Because I'm about out of my time before I turn it over for questions. But I just want you to realize that some of the things that we keep thinking about are, well, we can't get rid of content. I want to pose a couple of questions to you on the phone today. I want you to think about what you learned when you were in kindergarten, first grade through fifth grade. I want you to remember back to the memories that you had of those years. And then I want you to think about the children that we have today and where we have them with content. And as I remember back to my days, and I've just told you that I have 36 years of education, of teaching. In 36 years, you know that I'm in my 50s. I have to be, or I started as a brilliant mind person at 12, but that's not the case. I'm in my 50s, and when I look back to what was going on in my day, I remember physical education daily. I remember recesses, at least one in the morning, one in the afternoon daily, and I do not remember doing the kinds of math lessons and language arts lessons that we're doing today with our young kids. And to me, and to lots of other countries around, it's important that we keep and continue to have that play vision throughout the child's learning experience K through 8. These kids have to have these breaks. And so what you see here is being able to put that daily physical education back in for what I told you were the purposes of that piece. The health and well-being of our children, not just the academic outcome. We keep thinking about academics, but we forget that our kids are not healthy as a result of what we're doing to them with academics. They need structured and unstructured time, and they need it outdoors. They need it unstructured with time to play on their own and be able to have that ability to create and be innovative. Teachers, you need breaks too. Administrators think, well, they're paid to teach. Yes, they are, but they're paid to have breaks too. We cannot continue to stay in a classroom day in and day out without having some breaks. So when I do trainings with teachers, we take breaks every 45 minutes to an hour, and we do take 15-minute breaks even through training, which comes to my next one, which means when you do in-service trainings, administrators, please plug in the breaks. And I will tell you, as president of Tapered this year, we had our leadership workshop in January, and it just says what the agenda is, but it doesn't say what we do within that agenda. Every 45 minutes to an hour, guess what we did? We went outside and had 15-minute breaks. It's important that we start developing that in ourselves again, just like we want for our kids. Why? Because we don't want to have Alzheimer's, because our brains aren't firing on all cylinders either. And let me just tell you, you're not getting anything done by sitting in your seat for 2 and 3 hours at a time. You're spinning your wheels. You think you're getting things done, but how much more productive could you be if you got up, went outside, moved around a little bit, came back? You would be much more productive in a short period of time. And then I just want y'all to think about this. If you're doing the STAR test, and I think I misspelled that, but anyway, if you're doing the STAR test, you need to have breaks while doing the STAR test. I know it's not supposed to be a legal thing to do, but y'all, you need to think about pushing for that, because without them, the little kids' brains have already shut down after an hour. And those poor little guys and gals, all the way through high school, are sitting there going, oh, please shoot me now, just as you would if you had to sit and do that all day long because you couldn't get the answers to come out. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Play is the highest form of research, and I would tell you play is the highest form of healthy and well-being direction for our kids and for us as adults, and for allowing us to live out life to its fullest as we go. So, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the program specialist and see if there are any questions we need to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. It's really interesting to hear about your LINK project up there in Fort Worth. We are going to begin the question and answer section of the webinar. And if you would please type in your question, and we will make sure that Dr. Ray is apprised of what your question is. We already do have a question for you, Dr. Ray.
Okay.
Where are the schools that are in the study, and how can we as a school district get involved?
Oh, all right. The school districts that are going to be on board: Irving ISD and Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. And how can you get involved? You can email me at d.ray, R-H-E-A, at tcu.edu. And let me just say that the way that we're able to do the schools right now is that we are pretty much funding the project, and the school districts are allowing us to come in and work with their teachers, do the observations with the kids, and we have been able to take in the money through foundations at this point, but we're going to need more funding to be able to do it. But what we can do is we can start working on some fundamental things right now in order to try to launch a project like this in your school district in the near future, and we can definitely dialogue about that and how we could move this forward.
Great.
Yep.
Dr. Ray, we just actually sent out your email address to the participants, so if they will look down in the question box, they will see your email address. We do have another question,
All right.
And this is kind of a little bit different. When a class goes outside and two kids just want to sit on the bench, what do you do?
I love that question. Thank you for asking. Let them. And here's I'm so glad you asked that question. Let me give you a little preface on this. When I was watching kids in Finland, I was there, as I told you, and I was there for 6 weeks. And during that time, I observed a lot of elementary, middle, and high school settings, all of them taking 15-minute breaks every hour, because that's a requirement from the country. So they all did this. But what I found is that kids will move when they want to move, and they will sit when they want to sit. And what we realized is that if you had 4th and 5th graders who right now don't know how to move because they've been sitting for so long, if you've seen the movie WALL-E, you know what I'm talking about. It just takes time to get the body going again. But for these young kids, let me just tell you, they may come out and sit for about, a minute or two, and then up they go, and they're chasing somebody, joining the back of a line, going up on the hill. They have to have the time to move in their space the way they want to, and it's okay. It's not part of our job to tell them how to move or when to move. It's our job just to make sure that the environment stays safe, but it's our job too to make sure that we are getting our break time. So it's not for us to remove ourselves from that place, but it's just our time to just breathe and watch the kids. Let me just tell you, the energy that comes from them in that play environment is amazing. You start hearing laughter again, and kids who are just, they're just so playful, and it's just an amazing thing to watch. So I know all you asked me was, what do you do? And I told you, let them sit. But just trust that they know when they need to move, and they know when they need to stand around and do nothing, or when they need to sit. So that's my answer, and if you want more, you can always email me about that too.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from a webinar participant. Mm-hmm. Our school does not have recess at all. Our principal says we are an academic school. Behavior issues are off the chart. What are some of the key things to bring to the principal's attention besides our webinar?
Maybe they want to show the results that I've put on here today. Maybe they want to think about adding a character development piece at this point to the school setting, because you remember I told you that the character development piece will help with what goes on with these behaviors in and outside of the school. At the same time, if you could get the superintendent or somebody to visit with me, I would love to do so. We are going to have another webinar coming up in another month, and we haven't set the exact date yet. I'm going to go ahead and say I think it's going to be March 5th, but we've got to figure that out. And then from there, if you can get them on there, that will be superintendents talking from around this area that have worked on this project, as well as we may have a surprise visitor that I'm working on right now that will be a really cool asset to the next webinar. So that would be another thing you could do.
That's great to know, and certainly we will go over the webinar for next month here when we get ready to close out. One question that came in about Finland.
Yes.
Is Finland's population as diverse as ours here in Texas?
That's a great question too. And the question that I would ask back to you is, how do you define diversity? And I know I can't get your answer because you're on the other end with no voice, but I'll kind of answer it for you because I've had this question before. diversity typically, when people think about it, revolves around race and socioeconomic status, typically. And I would argue that it's even more about equality as well. And if you think about how diversity is spread between the two countries, don't think about Finland being compared to the U.S. Think about Finland being compared to Texas. And if you do that, then it's state to state. And with Finland, the diversity has more to do with Somalian pirates and also different languages coming in from different countries. So they may not look different ethnically. Oh, sorry about that. I was having a hard time. Or race, but they are different with language. So Sweden, Russian, and Finnish are all very closely aligned in that area of the region. And then you add the Somalians with their own language. You've got 4 different languages that are coming in and out, and Finland invites anybody to come into their country and have a free education. So if you're talking about something like that, yes, they're very diverse. But let me throw in one more piece to you. They do not believe in dual language. Remember I told you they have 4 different languages coming in and out of their country on a daily basis. And they continue to maintain the standards that they have. What's happening is that they require all kids to speak Finnish from the time they enter the school building until the time they leave. Only Finnish. In 3rd grade, they introduce English as a second language. In 5th grade, they introduce Swedish as a 3rd language. In 7th grade, they introduce Russian or German or Italian as that 4th language. And in 9th grade, they introduce whatever 5th language the student wants to learn. These students are coming away with many different languages. We're coming away barely speaking 2, if we can even do that. So I think one of the questions is across the diversity piece is, if we are diverse, how do we handle that diversity? And that's a question for another, we can talk about that, but that's another question that needs to happen. But yes, they're diverse with languages.
Another question we've gotten from one of our webinar participants relates to discipline. And have you done any studies with the discipline? The participant wants to know if discipline problems have declined through the LINK project.
Yes, they have declined with the 2 private schools. With the public schools, we won't know until the fall how things are going with the decline, because in the spring, we're only observing them without the recesses and the character development piece, so we're probably going to see some really cool things out there. And I mean that in a very disciplined type way. But in the fall, when we start, we'll be able to tell you more about how the public schools are doing. I will tell you that we're finding like almost none in the bullying area, and it was a big deal in the Trinity Valley School with prior to us starting this LINK project, they were having bullying incidents, and that has gone down dramatically, as well as just fights and not getting along and not sharing equipment and things like that.
One other thing came up, and this could be for Diana or you, Dr. Ray. We had a participant state that this information needs to go to the state legislators, and who is because we're a state agency, we don't have an advocacy arm, but who at the Tapered program or organization is actually doing advocacy for getting this information to the legislators.
Can I speak, Diana? Let me speak about this first, and then she can also speak. But I'm concerned about I'm concerned about trying to change legislation right now, because this needs to be something that's done at the local level, and it needs to be something that if the state is going to relax state tests in order for local levels to be able to adapt their school schedules, that's great. But if it's to try to change legislation, I'm not for that. And the reason I'm not for it is this is what my next book is going to be on, is our country is OCD. Our state is OCD. And what that means is we're obsessive compulsive. We look at something, we say, this is great. And then if we don't see good results over a 3-year period, we let it go. The problem that we're having right now is that in legislation, we put things in, we require school districts to do these things, and then we don't allow training to make sure it goes over properly. We cannot be successful with what I'm asking schools to do without proper training. And if we go to legislation and say, we need to change this, require this in all school districts, no, it will be out of the schools in another 3 years. And so I'm very concerned that the message we take to them is one of just global awareness and not change legislation. This needs to be happening at the local level. The legislation that needs to change is just loosening up the requirements that are necessary, not adding requirements to what the schools have to do.
This is Diana, and I'll follow up with, I totally agree with what Debbie's saying, and we would like to educate our legislators about this project and the success of the project and the actual pillars within this research project of what needs to be done, so that they're educated and they understand the importance of physical activity and recess and free play within the school day, but not ask for legislation to be done or to be written. So that's kind of where we are with that.
Yep. And I think Diana and I both agree that we definitely will be communicating with legislators. But, I even think it's something that needs to come from the governor on down, on the message that needs to take place with how we can loosen up the strangulation that the state has on school districts.
Thank you. Here's another question about the recess itself. Why 4? And then can we adjust and only do 2 to start with? Or could you kind of give us some background on why 4?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those of your age, Dr. Ray, and I understand that physically active stuff. But kind of give us some background on why 4 and anything you might have to talk about as far as decreasing it to 2.
Absolutely. So what we've learned through not only Finland, but also the Asian countries are doing the recesses throughout the day also. And they learned that from Finland as well, and they've adopted it. But what we've learned from that is that activity has to take place across the day, not at one time. So if we said, we're going to do a 30-minute recess in the morning and let that be it, or we're going to do a before-school recess before we start the day, and then they can have after-school stuff, that doesn't work because the brain synapses are not helping them clear their brains between content areas. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to target as much as possible throughout the day that moving needs to continue to take place as we move from one content to the next, instead of let's do it all at once and then move away from that and just be content the rest of the day. We're still going to have issues with kids who need to move, especially in the younger grade levels. But what I would say is, why not start with 2? Why do we start with 4? Because if you're going to condition kids, you want to go ahead and condition them for what's the best for them and the best ability for their brains to be able to take in content, relax, take in content, relax, and create the brain synapses that it needs to really learn from the material. That's going to create the rigor in the classroom that I've been talking about on the platform. And by the way, I just want to say one more thing that I didn't say at the beginning, and that is, if you think about what this type of learning change does, I'm not asking people to change the way that they do their content. I'm not asking people to change what content they teach. What we're saying is that we're building a platform for learning to take place and for that rigor to actually be there. To say that we have rigor in the classroom right now is a myth. We do not have rigor in the classroom. We have teachers who are putting a lot of constraints on kids, but that's not rigor. Rigor is the ability for kids to take what they're getting and doing something with it, and that's not happening in what we've got out there in the classes right now.
Thank you. I think one of the things that I was wanting to know is, do you envision this project over the next couple years getting to the point where right now you're working on K through first and gradually increasing it to where it's a school-wide, in other words, all of the aggressively adding it into these schools that are working with you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it will be leading from one grade to the next, but I will say a couple of things along that question. One is that it doesn't mean schools can't go ahead and address this with the older grade levels. I mean, they could go ahead and put breaks in for the older grades too, but I wouldn't do it without the character development piece. I'm doing this very systematically to make sure that we have the data to show that it works and how it can work. Schools can go out there and they can change things now, but without proper training, teachers won't buy in. You won't have the 100% buy-in that you've got with what's going on with me right now, just because they've got to understand what's going on. But the other piece of that is once you put this in motion, you can start taking this with, if you've got the system down, your schools are going to want to do this, and you can bring all your schools in the district on board. So I see in the next 3 to 5 years, I see that we'll probably be in a place where school districts will be changing in this direction instead of just a certain number of schools, because we'll have the data to show it.
Yeah, and data is really important, and certainly
Absolutely.
we understand the structure and keeping the structure very solid until you get the data that you need. We do have another question about Finland. Are they doing recess before lunch?
Yes, right before. And just like the research shows, the more you can structure one of the recesses right before lunch, not only the more responsible the kids will be eating lunch, but they'll also eat a more healthy lunch, and they'll feel better about what they're doing going from that recess into the lunchtime.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of research on recess before lunch.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just remember, Finland, they do recess every 45 minutes.
Yeah, so they're getting recess a lot.
Oh, yeah, they are.
So here's a question about transitioning from elementary school to middle school.
Okay.
And have you seen any kind of issues transitioning children from elementary to middle school when they've had this model of frequent breaks, and now they're in middle school where they have the potential to be sitting more?
Keep in mind, two things. One, I've seen the transition in Finland where that's all they know, and they do very well with it. Okay, there's not a problem with transition because it's all they've known this forever, how to be active, how to have their break times. I will tell you that as they move from elementary into middle and high school, the breaks start looking different. But when you do breaks there, instead of having playgrounds that they're on, you actually have more outdoor ed kinds of activities. It might be that they're doing a 9 square in the air, which is a new kind of activity that's going on. They might be doing gaga pits where they've got gaga ball going on. They may do. There's a new thing out there now where they've got strips that go from tree to tree, and they can walk on a strip and then have another strip up higher that they're hanging onto with their hands, and they're walking across that for balance. Those things are out at middle school and high school areas. But they're more outdoor recreational kinds of breaks instead of playground breaks. So you see a very different type of play, but they still have the ability to do that. I would not recommend doing anything at the middle school and high school level with multiple breaks unless you have implemented a character development curriculum that actually works on the kids to change the culture or the environment of the school. And I will tell you that the positive action curriculum does change an environment within about 6 months, whether it's urban, rural, or suburban environments. So make sure that whatever you're choosing can create a change in the culture of the school. And then, hey, you can go with these recesses just like you do in elementary school, but change the environment that they are participating in.
Thank you. Another question about how long you see data collection to be needed. I know this is a pretty new project. What were you anticipating when you put it together a 5-year study, or are you going to kind of let the data let you know when you're to the point where you want to really send this out as a working model?
We have it planned for K through 8. And the reason for that is, we don't know how it's going to impact our kids in this culture as they move through the grade levels. We think we do, but without data to show it, all we can do is talk to what we think we're going to see or what we see, and then without the data proof, we're so data-driven in the U.S., it won't stick. And so we're going to continue to do this through grade 8. Does that mean that school districts can't start something if we find data is showing that they can go ahead and start a whole elementary school in it? No, they can go ahead and start. And we'll start putting together programs where people can go through the training and do what they need to do in order to be very successful with this. But we will be measuring through grade 8.
We will certainly be watching as you go along, and hopefully we can continue to do webinars to keep updated on how this works out and any learning that you've developed along the way. We have gotten several comments of people asking for the PowerPoint presentation, and so we have definitely we will definitely get this posted to the DSHS website, as well as Diana Everett has agreed to put it on the Tapered website as well. We are going to send an email link to all registrants after the project or after the broadcast and in a follow-up email. So we will have the ability to get you the PowerPoints, the PowerPoint presentation. And then again, Debbie, they've asked you whether or not you'd be interested in doing other webinars, and I think generally we'd love to have you again speak to our audience.
Yeah, that'd be great.
One of the things we'd like to do is to just do a little showcase for those in the audience. This is a 2-part series, and the second part of the series, Debbie, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you're hoping to get done through peer-to-peer interaction.
Yes. So I referred to it just a few minutes ago, but the second webinar is going to be an extension of this one, where we really want superintendents and administrators on this call as much as possible, because we're going to have Jimmy Chadwell, Dr. Chadwell from Eagle Mountain Saginaw on the call. And we'll probably have somebody from Irving ISD on the call, and we're going to have another superintendent from another area of the state on the call, as well as we'll have a couple of principals that are part of this project as well, talking about how has it been to go through this, to think about creating a change, what do they need to be able to allow teachers to be able to do, what are the pitfalls, what are the frustrations, what are the good things and the bad. But this is going to be a real extension of this particular talk on being able to ask questions to them on, hey, what made you feel like you could do this? Or, okay, so you're doing it, but how are you feeling as far as the control aspect? And what if these results don't come out well with third grade results? I mean, are you worried about that? These are all things that can come out from the next webinar.
Great. We don't have any more questions, so I guess at this point we'd like to invite everybody to, hold their seats until we can get you more information about our next broadcast. Again, it will be the first week in March. We're still trying to fine-tune the exact date. We will have all of the PowerPoints available at the end of this presentation. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank Dr. Ray and Diane Everett and the Texas Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance for being part of this webinar series. We feel like it's really important for schools to get quality staff development, quality information. And so we do thank both of you for being with us this morning. We'd like to turn it over to either one of you for any closing remarks you might have.
Diana, anything you want me to go first? You want?
Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody for being on today, and I really want to thank our Department of State Human Services, Health Services, because it's really awesome to be able to put these two groups together and find the passion to bring movement back to the schools, to bring the structured and unstructured, and create an environment for kids. So thanks for being on today. Thanks for being part of this collaborative effort, and we hope to see you in March as well.
I'll just follow that with a ditto. Couldn't have said any of it any better. We're just excited to partner with DSHS, and hopefully all of you will come back and listen to the next webinar.
All right, so that closes out our webinar today. Please look forward to our next broadcast, which we believe will be the first week in March. We will send out notices as far and wide as we can. And if you really want to get your administrators involved, invite them to sit in, because this next webinar will actually be their peers in implementing more physical activity. So again, thank you for participating. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in March. And at the time, we will close out the broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.